thought the sky belonged to him. Captain Caleb Sterling was the golden boy of Vanguard Airways, untouchable, arrogant, and used to getting exactly what he wanted. So when he saw a black woman sitting in seat 1A, the seat he had promised to his mistress, he didn't just ask her to move. He humiliated her. He thought she was nobody. He thought he had the power, but he had no idea that the woman he was disrespecting wasn't just a passenger. She was the one person who could end his career with a single phone call. Today, we're taking you inside the courtroom for the $50 million lawsuit that revealed the shocking truth. This isn't just a story about a seat. It's a story about the most brutal, satisfying karma you will ever hear. Buckle up. The air in the Superior Court of Los Angeles County was so stale it tasted like recycled dust and expensive cologne. It was the third day of Sterling versus Vanguard Airways, a wrongful termination suit that had captivated the business world, not because of the legal precedent, but because of the sheer audacity of the plaintiff. Captain Caleb Sterling sat in the witness box, looking every inch the American hero. He had the jawline of a movie star, hair the color of brushed steel, and a smile that had likely charmed flight attendants for 3 decades. He wore a navy blue bespoke suit that probably cost more than the bailiff's car. He didn't look like a man who had been fired. He looked like a man who was temporarily embarrassed by the incompetence of his inferiors. Captain Sterling, his lawyer, a shark named Jonathan Pierce, paced the floor. Pierce was known for 2 things: winning impossible cases and destroying reputations. Could you tell the jury why you believe your termination was unlawful? Sterling cleared his throat, leaning into the microphone with practiced ease. It was a breach of contract, plain and simple. I have served Vanguard Airways for 25 years. I have a spotless record. I am the senior-most pilot in the fleet. The decision to remove a passenger for flight safety is within the captain's discretion. The airline fired me for doing my job. And the passenger in question? Pierce asked, turning to glare at the defense table. Disruptive, Sterling said smoothly. Belligerent. When I boarded the aircraft, I assessed a potential conflict in the first-class cabin. Protocol dictates that the captain has the final say on the manifest. I made a command decision to de-escalate the situation by reassigning seats. I was fired because the passenger happened to play the race card, and the CEO, Brian Vane, panicked. A murmur rippled through the gallery. In the front row, holding a notepad, sat the woman in question. Dr. Alicia Thorne didn't look up. She kept her eyes focused on her hands, which were folded neatly on her lap. She was wearing a sharp charcoal blazer, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. To the casual observer, she looked like a quiet, perhaps intimidated witness. But Julian Blackwood, the lead counsel for Vanguard Airways, knew better. He glanced at her and saw the slight tightening of her jaw. She wasn't intimidated. She was counting down the seconds. So you contend, Pierce continued, that Mr. Vane fired you without due process, slanderously labeling you a racist, simply to appease public relations? I do, Sterling said, his voice dropping to a register of deep, wounded pride. I lost my pension. I lost my reputation. I was escorted off the tarmac like a criminal. And for what? For asking a woman to swap seats with a deadheading crew member? It happened every day. It was a routine, operational adjustment. Julian Blackwood stood up slowly. He was a younger man, sharp-featured, and known for a style of cross-examination that felt less like an interrogation and more like a surgical dismantling. Objection to the characterization, routine operational adjustment, Julian said calmly. Sustained, Judge Harrison Vance grunted, peering over his spectacles. Stick to the facts, Captain, Sterling smirked at the judge. He felt invincible. He had the flight logs. He had the union on his side. He knew that the passenger, this Alicia Thorne, was nobody. She hadn't appeared in any company databases he checked before the flight. Just some random woman who got lucky with an upgrade. He was going to walk out of here with $50 million and his job back. Captain Sterling, Julian said, walking toward the stand, you stated that the passenger was belligerent. Can you define that for the court? She refused a direct order from the captain, Sterling said, his eyes narrowing. A direct order to vacate a seat she had paid for? A direct order to assist in flight logistics. The seat was needed for a federal air marshal. Sterling lied. It was a lie he had stuck to since the incident report. Julian paused. He picked up a piece of paper from his desk. A federal air marshal. Interesting, because in your initial deposition you said the seat was needed for a senior company VIP. And in the incident report filed by the gate agent, you claimed the seat was double booked due to a computer error. Now it's a marshal. Which is it, Captain? Sterling didn't flinch. I used discretion to protect the identity of the marshal at the time. It was a matter of national security. National security, Julian repeated, a dry smile touching his lips. On a flight from Atlanta to Miami? You never know where threats lie, Sterling said gravely. No, you certainly don't, Julian said, glancing back at Alicia Thorne. No further questions for now, Your Honor. As Sterling stepped down, he shot a look of pure venom at Alicia. Just you wait, his eyes seemed to say. I'm going to crush you. He had no idea that the woman he was glaring at wasn't just a passenger. He had no idea that the air marshal story was about to be torn apart by the very technology he claimed to master. And he certainly didn't know that the CEO, Brian Vane, was currently sitting in the back of the courtroom wearing a baseball cap and watching the proceedings with the cold detachment of an executioner. 3 months earlier, the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was a chaotic symphony of rolling suitcases, screaming toddlers, and the low hum of anxiety that permeates all modern travel. But for Dr. Alicia Thorne, the chaos was background noise. She moved through the terminal with the efficiency of a woman who lived her life in 15-minute intervals. She checked her watch, a vintage Cartier tank, 1:45 p.m. Boarding for Vanguard Flight 882 to Miami was scheduled for 2 p.m. Alicia adjusted the strap of her leather tote. She was exhausted. She had just spent 3 weeks in intense negotiations in Seattle, finalizing the acquisition of a boutique avionics firm that specialized in fuel efficiency algorithms. It was a deal that would save Vanguard Airways nearly $200 million a year. Nobody knew who she was. That was by design. When Brian Vane, the eccentric and brilliant CEO of Vanguard, had hired her 6 months ago as the Senior Vice President of Strategic Operations, they had agreed on a peculiar onboarding process. She would spend her first year as a ghost. She would fly the routes, inspect the hubs, and audit the service without the fanfare of a corporate title. To the staff, she was just another face in the crowd. To the board, she was the grim reaper of inefficiency. Today, she just wanted to get home. She had treated herself, on her own dime, not the company account, to a first-class ticket, seat 1A. She wanted champagne, a hot towel, and silence. She reached gate B12 just as the boarding announcement began. Welcome to Vanguard Flight 882, service to Miami. We are now inviting our first-class passengers and Diamond Medallion members to board. Alicia approached the scanner. She pulled up her boarding pass on her phone. The gate agent, a frazzled young man named Kevin, scanned it. Beep. A green light. Welcome aboard, Miss Thorne, Kevin said, barely looking up. She walked down the jet bridge, the cool air of the aircraft hitting her face. She stepped onto the plane and turned left into the first-class cabin. It was empty, save for a flight attendant arranging pre-flight drinks. Good afternoon, the attendant, whose tag read Sarah, said brightly. Can I take your coat? Please, Alicia smiled, handing over her blazer. She settled into seat 1A, a window seat with ample legroom. She sat down, exhaled a long breath, and closed her eyes. Finally, she had just opened her Kindle to start reading when a shadow fell over her. She looked up. Standing in the aisle, looming over her with his cap tucked under his arm, was the pilot, Captain Caleb Sterling. He wasn't looking at her face. He was looking at her ticket, which she had placed on the center console. Then he looked at her attire, jeans and a silk blouse. Casual. Comfortable. Excuse me, Sterling said. His voice wasn't loud, but it had a hard, metallic edge to it. Alicia marked her page and looked up. Yes? I think you're in the wrong seat, Sterling said. He didn't ask, he stated. Alicia frowned slightly. She picked up her boarding pass. 1A. This is 1A, isn't it? Sterling let out a short, impatient sigh, the kind a parent gives a slow child. I know what the number says, ma'am. I'm telling you there's been a mistake. This seat is reserved. Reserved? Alicia checked her phone again. I booked this ticket 3 weeks ago. I checked in 24 hours ago. It's my seat. Sterling leaned in closer, invading her personal space. The smell of coffee and arrogance was overpowering. Listen, sweetheart, we have a situation with the manifest. I have a VIP deadheading who needs this seat. It's a weight distribution issue. Alicia raised an eyebrow. She held a PhD in aerospace engineering from MIT. She knew more about weight distribution than Sterling could learn in 10 lifetimes. You have a weight distribution issue that requires moving a 130-pound woman from 1A, but allows a VIP to sit there on a Boeing 737? The center of gravity envelope isn't that fragile, Captain. Sterling's face flushed. He wasn't used to passengers using technical terms. He wasn't used to passengers talking back, and he certainly wasn't used to black women in jeans questioning his authority in his cockpit's vicinity. I don't need a physics lesson, Sterling snapped. I am the captain of this vessel. Under FAA regulations, I have the authority to remove any passenger who interferes with the flight crew. Now, grab your bag. I'm moving you to 24B. It's an exit row. Consider it an upgrade from being kicked off. Alicia stared at him. Her heart rate spiked, not from fear, but from a cold, simmering rage. She looked past him and saw a woman standing in the galley. The woman was blonde, wearing a tight pink dress that was definitely not crew uniform. She was chewing gum and looking at her phone, waiting expectantly. She didn't look like a federal air marshal. She didn't look like a deadheading pilot. She looked like a date. Is that the VIP? Alicia asked quietly, nodding toward the woman. Sterling blocked her view with his shoulder. That is none of your concern. Now move. I won't ask twice. Sarah, the flight attendant, looked terrified. She stepped forward tentatively. Captain Sterling, maybe we can check the system. Miss Thorne is a Diamond member. Quiet, Sarah. Sterling barked without looking at her. Get the gate agent. Tell them I have a non-compliant passenger. Alicia sat very still. She had 2 choices. Choice A, cause a scene. Refuse to move. Get dragged off by security. It would be viral, it would be messy, and it would potentially delay the flight for 200 other people. Choice B, comply. Observe. And destroy him later. She looked at Sterling's name badge. Captain M. Sterling. She memorized it. She memorized the smirk on his face. She memorized the way he winked at the blonde woman in the pink dress as he thought Alicia wasn't looking. Alicia stood up slowly. She picked up her bag. Smart choice, Sterling sneered. Economy is back that way. I know the way, Alicia said softly. Her voice was ice. I know exactly where everything is on this plane, do you? Sterling laughed, a harsh barking sound. I fly it, lady. You just ride in it. Alicia walked past him. As she passed the blonde woman, the woman gave her a pitying, condescending smile and slipped past her into seat 1A, immediately asking Sterling for a glass of champagne. Alicia walked down the long, narrow aisle. Heads turned. People whispered. The humiliation burned her cheeks. She walked all the way back to row 24. Seat B was a middle seat, not an exit row as promised. She was wedged between a man eating a tuna sandwich and a teenager playing a video game at full volume. She sat down. She took out her phone. She didn't open social media. She didn't text a friend. She opened the Vanguard Corporate Directory app, the one only accessible via the encrypted VPN on her phone. She typed in Brian Vane. She hit the call button. Alicia? Brian's voice answered on the second ring. You back in Miami yet? I wanted to go over the Seattle numbers. I'm on the plane, Brian, Alicia said, her voice trembling slightly with suppressed adrenaline. But we have a problem. What kind of problem? Mechanical? No, Alicia said, staring at the back of the seat in front of her. Personnel. Specifically, a Captain Caleb Sterling. I need you to pull his file. Right now. Why? What did he do? He just kicked me out of first class, Alicia whispered, so his girlfriend could sit there. And Brian? Yeah? He told me he did it for safety. He just made the biggest mistake of his life. The courtroom air conditioning hummed, a low, mechanical drone that seemed to grow louder as the silence stretched on. Julian Blackwood stood in the center of the room, holding a single, thin sheet of paper as if it were a loaded weapon. Captain Sterling shifted in the witness box. He crossed his legs, then uncrossed them. He took a sip of water, his eyes darting from the jury to his lawyer, Jonathan Pierce. Pierce gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of his head. Don't worry. Hold the line. Captain Sterling, Julian began, his voice dropping to a conversational volume, which was far more dangerous than shouting. You testified earlier that the decision to move Miss Thorne was based on a security threat, specifically an urgent need to accommodate a federal air marshal. That is correct, Sterling said, his chin jutting out. Safety is paramount. And you are aware, Julian continued, pacing slowly toward the jury box, that all commercial aircraft are equipped with an ACARS system, Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System? Sterling scoffed. I have 30,000 flight hours, counselor. I know what ACARS is. It's a data link system for transmitting messages between the aircraft and ground stations. Precisely, Julian said. It sends technical data, engine performance, fuel levels. But it also allows the flight deck to send free text messages to the airline's dispatch center, sort of like texting from the cockpit. It is used for operational necessities, Sterling corrected him sharply. Operational necessities, Julian repeated. He turned back to the defense table and picked up a heavy binder. He dropped it onto the stand with a heavy thud that made the court reporter jump. Exhibit C, Your Honor. The complete ACARS transcript for Vanguard Flight 882, dated October 14th. Pierce jumped up. Objection. Relevance. These are internal company communications. They go directly to the witness's state of mind and credibility regarding the AAA security threat, Julian countered. Overruled, Judge Vance said, leaning forward. Proceed. Julian flipped the binder open. He ran his finger down the page. Captain, at 1:52 p.m., 8 minutes before departure, roughly the exact moment you were ordering Miss Thorne out of her seat, you sent a message to the dispatcher in Miami, a Mr. Greg Sullivan. Do you recall that message? Sterling's face went pale. A small bead of sweat broke out on his temple, traversing the rugged terrain of his tan skin. I communicate with dispatch frequently. I can't recall every specific line. Allow me to refresh your memory, Julian said. He lifted the page and read aloud, articulating every syllable. Your message reads, Gate agents are morons, double booked. Sorted it out, moving the obstacle to the back. The package is secure in 1A. Make sure the limo is ready for Leora. A gasp rippled through the gallery. The jury members looked at one another. Julian looked up over the paper. The package? The obstacle? And who, pray tell, is Leora? Is Leora the code name for the federal air marshal? Sterling gripped the railing of the witness box. His knuckles turned white. It's pilot slang. Package refers to the secure asset. Leora is a code. A code, Julian said flatly. Interesting, because at 1:55 p.m., Mr. Sullivan replied, Copy that, Captain. Leora's hotel is confirmed. The Ritz. Enjoy the layover. Julian let the words hang in the air. Does the TSA usually book federal air marshals into the Ritz-Carlton under the name of your mistress, Leora Rossi? Objection! Pierce shouted, his face turning red. Counsel is speculating. I'm not speculating, Julian said calmly. pulling out a photograph. "I am holding a printout of an Instagram story posted by Ms. Leora Rossi, time-stamped at 2:15 p.m. from seat 1A on flight 882. The caption reads, 'My captain takes care of me. First class all to myself. #pilotlife, #VIP. Julian walked up to Sterling and placed the photo on the ledge of the witness box. "Is this the Federal Air Marshal who was protecting the flight, Captain? The woman holding a glass of champagne and wearing a pink cocktail dress?" Sterling stared at the photo. The silence in the room was absolute. The Golden Boy facade was cracking. He looked at the jury and saw disgust. He looked at Alicia Thorne, hoping to see triumph, but he saw only a cold, impassive mirror reflecting his own ruin. Sterling stammered. It was a judgment call. She was a person of interest to the airline. I was tasked with ensuring her comfort. "You were tasked with flying a plane, Captain?" Julian snapped, his voice finally rising to a thunderous boom. "Not running a flying dating service at the expense of paying customers. You humiliated a woman, forced her into a middle seat in the back, lied to your crew, and lied to this court, all so your girlfriend could have extra legroom. Is that your definition of flight safety?" Sterling didn't answer. He couldn't. He slumped back in the chair, the air hissing out of him like a punctured tire. "No further questions, Your Honor," Julian said, buttoning his jacket. As the judge called for a recess, Alicia remained seated. She watched Sterling struggle to stand up, his legs shaking. She remembered the flight. She remembered the humiliation. But mostly she remembered the landing. That was when the real storm had begun, 3 months earlier. Miami International Airport. The descent into Miami had been rough. Summer thunderstorms were rolling off the Everglades, tossing the Boeing 737 around like a toy. In the cockpit, Captain Sterling was laughing, hand-flying the approach, with the confidence of a man who believed gravity was a suggestion, not a law. In seat 24B, Alicia Thorne was not laughing. She was wedged between the armrests, her laptop open on the tray table, despite the flight attendant's earlier request to put it away. She was typing furiously. She wasn't working on the avionics deal anymore. She was drafting a termination order. She had spent the 2-hour flight connected to the onboard Wi-Fi, pulling Sterling's personnel file. It was a monument to narcissism. 3 harassment complaints in the last 5 years, all swept under the rug by the union. A warning for fuel mismanagement. A reputation for treating co-pilots like servants. When the wheels slammed onto the wet tarmac, a round of applause broke out in the cabin. It was a tourist flight after all. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Miami." The intercom crackled. Sterling's voice was smooth, devoid of the tension of the landing. "We've arrived 10 minutes ahead of schedule because that's how we do it at Vanguard. Temperature is a balmy 85 degrees. Thanks for flying with the best." As the plane taxied to the gate, the fasten seatbelt sign turned off. Alicia didn't stand up immediately. She waited. She watched the passengers in front of her struggle with overhead bins. She waited until the aisle cleared. She walked forward. When she reached the front of the plane, the cockpit door was open. Sterling was standing in the galley, leaning against the bulkhead, his cap back on his head at a rakish angle. The blonde woman, Leora, was giggling, holding her carry-on bag. "You were amazing up there, Mark," Leora purred. "Just another day at the office, babe." Sterling grinned. He looked up and saw Alicia approaching. His smile curdled into a sneer. "Hope the ride in the back wasn't too bumpy," Sterling said, his voice loud enough for the flight attendants to hear. "The air is a little thinner back there, isn't it?" Alicia stopped. She smoothed the front of her blazer. She looked him dead in the eye. "The ride was informative, Captain," she said. Sterling rolled his eyes. Yeah. Go file a complaint on the website. Maybe we'll send you a coupon." He turned his back on her and grabbed his flight bag. "Come on, Leora. Let's get out of here before the cleaners block the jet bridge." Sterling strode out of the plane, walking down the jet bridge with his signature swagger. He emerged into the terminal, expecting the usual scene: tired passengers, bored gate agents. Instead, he walked into a wall of silence. The gate area was strangely empty of passengers. The boarding area had been cordoned off. Standing right at the end of the jet bridge, flanked by 2 airport police officers and the station manager, was a man in a black baseball cap and a navy windbreaker. Sterling paused. He recognized the man immediately. Everyone in aviation did. It was Brian Vane, the CEO of Vanguard Airways. Sterling's heart did a strange double beat. Vane? Here? His ego immediately supplied an explanation. He's here for me. The landing. It was a difficult approach. He must have been tracking it. He's here to commend the senior pilot. Sterling puffed out his chest. He fixed his tie. He walked straight toward the CEO, extending his hand. Mr. Vane, Sterling said, putting on his best company voice. What an unexpected honor. We hit a little turbulence coming in, but I brought her down smooth. Brian Vane didn't take the hand. He didn't even look at it. He was looking over Sterling's shoulder, down the jet bridge. Step aside, Caleb, Vane said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a guillotine blade. Sterling froze. Sir? I said, step aside. Sterling, confused and suddenly feeling very small, shuffled to the left. Behind him, Alicia Thorne walked out of the jet bridge. She looked tired. Her hair was slightly frizzy from the humidity and the stress. She was carrying her own bag. Brian Vane's face, previously made of stone, softened instantly. He stepped forward and took Alicia's bag from her hand. Alicia, Vane said, I am so incredibly sorry. Sterling's jaw dropped. He looked from Vane to the woman in jeans. Nobody. Mr. Vane? Sterling laughed nervously, a high-pitched, jagged sound. I think there's a misunderstanding. This passenger was... She was disruptive. I had to move her for operational security. Brian Vane slowly turned his head to look at Sterling. It was the look a predator gives to prey that has already been killed, but doesn't know it yet. Disruptive? Vane repeated. Operational security? Yes, sir. I had a VIP. Sterling gestured vaguely behind him, but Leora, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure, had already scurried away toward the baggage claim, leaving him alone. Caleb, Vane said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Do you know who this is? Sterling looked at Alicia. He squinted. She's a passenger. This, Vane said, gesturing to Alicia, is Dr. Alicia Thorne. She is the Senior Vice President of Strategic Operations. She is the woman who just negotiated the deal that is going to pay for the new fleet you are hoping to fly next year. She is effectively your boss's boss. The color drained from Sterling's face so fast it looked like a physical blow. His knees actually buckled. He grabbed the podium of the gate agent's desk to steady himself. VP, Sterling whispered. But she's not on the list. She's black. Alicia spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were blazing. She's wearing jeans? She doesn't look like someone who could fire you? Sterling stammered. No, Dr. Thorne, I had no idea. If I had known, that, Vane cut in, is exactly the problem. If you had known she was powerful, you would have treated her with respect. But because you thought she was powerless, you treated her like garbage. Vane took a step closer to Sterling. He reached out and, with a slow, deliberate motion, took the ID badge clipping to Sterling's lapel. Hey! Sterling started. Vane yanked it off. The clip snapped. You are relieved of duty. Effective. Immediately, Vane said. You are grounded, Caleb. Pending a formal investigation, which, given what Alicia has already sent me from the air, will likely conclude by tomorrow morning. You can't do this, Sterling shouted, panic finally setting in. I have a union. I have rights. You can't fire me for a seating dispute. I'm not firing you for a seating dispute, Vane said, handing the ID badge to the station manager. I'm firing you for gross misconduct, misappropriation of company assets, falsifying a manifest and endangering the reputation of this airline. You insulted the wrong woman, Captain, and now you're going to learn what it's like to sit in the back. Vane turned to Alicia. The car is waiting. Let's go. They walked away, leaving Sterling standing alone at the gate, stripped of his badge, stripped of his dignity, while the passengers he had flown disembarked and walked past him, staring at the man who had thought he owned the sky, now grounded permanently. But as Alicia walked away, she knew it wasn't over. Men like Sterling didn't go quietly. They sued, and that was how they ended up in court. The afternoon sun sliced through the high windows of the courtroom, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny chaotic ghosts. The mood in the room had shifted. The revelation of the Leora text messages had been a blow to Captain Sterling, but his lawyer, Jonathan Pierce, was a man who thrived in the mud. If he couldn't defend his client's actions, he would destroy the accuser's character. The defense calls Dr. Alicia Thorne to the stand, Pierce announced, his voice smooth and predatory. Alicia stood up. She smoothed her skirt, her face a mask of calm composure, though inside, her stomach was a knot of cold iron. She walked to the witness box, swore the oath, and sat down. She felt Sterling's eyes on her, hateful, burning. Pierce approached the stand. He didn't look at his notes. He looked directly at Alicia, smiling a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Dr. Thorne, Pierce began, you are the Senior Vice President of Strategic Operations for Vanguard Airways, a very powerful position. You report directly to the CEO, Mr. Vane, do you not? I do, Alicia said clearly, and part of your job description involves efficiency audits, correct? Assessing staff performance? That is one aspect of my role, yes. Pierce nodded, pacing the floor. And on the day in question, October 14th, you were traveling anonymously. You weren't wearing a company badge. You didn't identify yourself to the crew. You were, effectively, undercover. I was traveling as a passenger, Alicia corrected him. I was not conducting an official audit that day. I was returning from a business trip. But you could have identified yourself, Pierce pressed, leaning in. When Captain Sterling asked you to move, when he explained there was a security issue, you could have simply said, Captain, I am Vice President Thorne. And this whole misunderstanding would have evaporated. Isn't that true? Alicia hesitated. It was a trap. I could have. But I shouldn't have to invoke a title to be treated with basic dignity. Pierce spun around to face the jury, his arms wide. Dignity? Or entrapment? A murmur ran through the courtroom. Objection. Julian Blackwood stood up. Argumentative. I am establishing a motive, Your Honor. Pierce shot back. He turned back to Alicia. I put it to you, Dr. Thorne, that you wanted this to happen. You saw a pilot making a difficult command decision, and instead of assisting him, you saw an opportunity to flex your new corporate muscles. You sat there, silent, hoarding your identity like a weapon, waiting for him to make a mistake so you could destroy him. You didn't want a seat, Dr. Thorne. You wanted a scalp. That is untrue, Alicia said, her voice rising slightly. I was humiliated. I was forced to the back of the plane while his mistress took my seat. According to you, Pierce scoffed. But isn't it true that you have a history of aggressive management? That in your previous role at Boeing you were known for cleaning house? Perhaps you decided Captain Sterling was too old, too expensive, and you needed a reason to fire him to save the company money on his pension? Alicia gripped the railing. The narrative was twisting. He was turning her into the villain, the cold, heartless corporate executioner coming for the working man's job. She looked at the jury. A few of them were nodding. They liked pilots. They didn't like corporate VPs. I fired him because he is a racist and a liar, Alicia said coldly. Not because of his pension. Racist? Pierce feigned shock. That is a serious accusation. Captain Sterling has flown for 25 years. He has flown millions of passengers of all races. Do you have a single shred of proof that his decision was racially motivated? Did he use a slur? Did he mention your skin color? Alicia remained silent. Sterling hadn't used a slur. He had been careful. He had used tone. body language, and the word sweetheart. It was the kind of dog whistle racism that is deafening to the victim, but silent to the law. I thought not, Pierce sneered. He moved you because you were in the way of a flight operation, and because you felt slighted. You used your friendship with the CEO to ruin a man's life. No further questions. Alicia stepped down, her heart pounding. She walked back to her seat. She felt the weight of the room pressing on her. Pierce had done his job well. He had muddied the water. If the jury believed, this was just a corporate power struggle. Sterling might win. He might get his $50 million. And she would be the woman who destroyed a hero for sport. Julian leaned over to her. "Don't worry," he whispered. He played his hand. "Now we play ours." "The defense rests," Pierce announced smugly, sitting down next to Sterling. Sterling loosed a breath, looking almost giddy. He whispered something to Pierce, and they both chuckled. Julian Blackwood stood up. He adjusted his cufflinks. He looked at the judge. "Your Honor, the plaintiff claims there is no proof of malice. He claims there is no proof of the real reason Miss Thorne was moved. We would like to call a rebuttal witness, Ms. Sarah Jenkins." Sterling's head snapped up. The color that had returned to his face during his lawyer's cross-examination drained away instantly. The back doors of the courtroom opened. Sarah Jenkins walked in. She looked different than she had on the plane. She wasn't wearing the Vanguard uniform. She was wearing a simple gray dress. She looked terrified. She kept her eyes on the floor, avoiding Sterling's death stare as she walked to the stand. Sarah was sworn in. She sat down, her hands trembling visible in her lap. "Miss Jenkins," Julian said gently, "you were the senior flight attendant on Flight 882 on October 14th, correct?" "Yes, sir," Sarah whispered. "Speak up, please, Miss Jenkins," the judge said softly. "Yes, sir," she repeated, louder this time. "Miss Jenkins, you witnessed the interaction between Captain Sterling and Dr. Thorne. Can you tell the court what happened after Dr. Thorne moved to the back of the plane?" Pierce stood up. "Objection, hearsay. She is an eyewitness to the events in the cabin," Julian argued. "It goes to the core of the hostile work environment claim." "Overruled," the judge said. "Answer the question." Sarah took a deep breath. She looked at Alicia, finding a brief anchor of strength, then looked back at Julian. "After Miss Thorne moved, Captain Sterling brought the woman, the one in the pink dress, to seat 1A. He told me to bring her a bottle of champagne immediately." "Did he say anything else?" Julian asked. Sarah bit her lip. Tears welled in her eyes. He was laughing. He was standing in the galley with the cockpit door open. He was talking to the first officer, but he was loud. He wanted us to hear. "What did he say, Sarah?" Sarah closed her eyes. He said, "I can't believe she actually moved. I thought she was going to go ghetto on me." A sharp intake of breath hissed through the courtroom. "He used those words?" Julian asked, his voice hard. "Yes." "And then he said—" Sarah paused, wiping a tear from her cheek. "He said, it doesn't matter how nice they dress, they all know their place when a uniform tells them to move. Now get Leora a drink before she gets bored." Sterling slammed his hand on the table. "She's lying. She's a disgruntled employee. I wrote her up for being late." "Sit down, Mr. Sterling," Judge Vance bellowed, banging his gavel. "One more outburst and I will hold you in contempt." Sterling sank back, seething. Pierce looked nervous for the first time. "Ms. Jenkins," Julian continued, "did you report this at the time?" "No," Sarah said quietly. "I was scared. Captain Sterling, he has a lot of power. He's known for getting flight attendants fired if they don't play along. I have 2 kids. I couldn't lose my job. But you're telling the truth now?" "Yes, because what he did to that woman, it wasn't right, and I can't sleep knowing he might get paid for it." "Thank you, Sarah," Julian said. "Cross-examination?" the judge asked. Pierce stood up, desperate. "Ms. Jenkins, you have no recording of this, do you? No video? Just your memory of a conversation 3 months ago? A conversation you magically remembered once the CEO offered you a promotion?" "I didn't get a promotion," Sarah cried. "No, but you kept your job while your captain lost his. Sounds like a deal was cut." Pierce sat down, looking satisfied. He had cast enough doubt. It was her word against the captain's. Julian walked back to his table. He picked up a USB drive. "Your Honor," Julian said. "Ms. Jenkins, testimony is compelling, but Mr. Pierce is right. Human memory is fallible. Fortunately, technology is not." He held up the drive. "The plaintiff, Captain Sterling, testified that he is a stickler for procedure. However, in his haste to seat his mistress and humiliate Miss Thorne, he made a critical error. At 1:58 p.m., while the aircraft was still at the gate, Captain Sterling performed a radio check with Miami Tower. However, his push-to-talk button on the yoke stuck." Sterling froze. His eyes widened to the size of saucers. "This is a phenomenon known as a hot mic," Julian explained to the jury. "For 45 seconds, everything said in the cockpit was broadcast on the ground control frequency. This frequency is recorded by the FAA. It is public record. We subpoenaed the audio logs yesterday." Julian plugged the drive into the court's A/V system. "Please listen carefully," Julian said. The courtroom fell into a dead silence. Static hissed through the speakers. Then, the voice of the tower controller. "Vanguard 882. Check your mic. You are transmitting on open carrier." But over the controller's voice, loud and crystal clear, came the voice of Caleb Sterling. "Tell you, babe, it's hilarious." She folded like a cheap lawn chair. "You should have seen her face. I'm in 1A. Yeah, not anymore, sweetheart. These people think a ticket buys them class. It doesn't." Then a female voice, Leora's, giggling. "You're so bad, Mark. What if she complains?" Sterling's voice again, booming with arrogance. "Let her complain. Who's gonna believe her? She's nobody. Just another affirmative action hire trying to act important. Now show me that dress." The recording cut out with a sharp click as the tower managed to squelch the frequency. The silence in the courtroom was heavier than lead. It wasn't just quiet. It was the vacuum of a destroyed life. Julian didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He simply looked at the jury. Every single juror was looking at Caleb Sterling with an expression of utter revulsion. Sterling didn't move. He stared at the table, his face a mask of gray ash. The golden boy was gone. In his place sat a man who had just hung himself with his own ego. Alicia looked at him. She didn't feel triumph. She felt a profound, exhausting relief. The truth wasn't just out. It was screaming. "We have no further questions, Your Honor," Julian said softly. The judge looked at Sterling. The disgust on Judge Vance's face was undisguised. "Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning for closing arguments," the judge said, his voice cold. "Though I suspect counsel might want to talk before then." It was the judicial equivalent of saying, "It's over." As the gavel banged, Brian Vane stood up in the back row. He adjusted his cap, looked at Sterling one last time, and walked out. He had a press release to write. But the drama wasn't done. The verdict was coming, and the karma was about to get financial. The silence in courtroom 4B the following morning was not peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, like the air inside a fuselage before a crash. The previous day's hot mic recording had effectively detonated Captain Caleb Sterling's case, his reputation, and his ego, in a single 45-second burst of static-laced audio. Sterling sat at the plaintiff's table. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years overnight. His bespoke suit, once armor, now looked like a costume he was too tired to wear. His lawyer, Jonathan Pierce, was packing his briefcase even before the jury entered. Pierce knew a lost cause when he saw one. He was already mentally calculating how to bill Sterling for the hours before the inevitable bankruptcy. "All rise," the bailiff intoned. Judge Harrison Vance entered. He didn't look at the lawyers. He didn't look at the gallery. He looked straight at Caleb Sterling. "Be seated," Judge Vance said. "The jury has reached a verdict." It had taken them less than 20 minutes. In the world of high-stakes corporate litigation, 20 minutes wasn't a deliberation. It was a rejection. The jury foreman, a middle-aged schoolteacher who had spent the entire trial taking meticulous notes, stood up. She refused to look at Sterling. In the matter of Sterling versus Vanguard Airways, she began, her voice clear and unwavering. "On the count of wrongful termination, we find in favor of the defendant. Vanguard Airways. Sterling closed his eyes. A muscle in his jaw jumped. On the count of defamation of character, she continued, we find in favor of the defendant. And regarding the defendant's countersuit, the foreman said, turning the page. Sterling's eyes snapped open. Countersuit? He had been so focused on his $50 million payout, he had barely paid attention when Julian Blackwood had filed the counterclaim for malicious prosecution and breach of fiduciary duty. We find that the plaintiff, Caleb Sterling, acted with malice and gross negligence. We find in favor of Vanguard Airways. A collective exhale went through the room. Damages, the foreman read. We award Vanguard Airways $0 in punitive damages, as per their request. However, we order the plaintiff to pay all legal fees incurred by the defense, totaling, she squinted at the paper, $1,450,000. Sterling gasped. The sound was audible, like a seal breaking. I don't have that, he whispered to Pierce. Pierce didn't even look at him. Then I suggest you sell your boat, Caleb. And your house. Members of the jury, you are dismissed, Judge Vance said. But he didn't bang the gavel yet. He turned his gaze back to Sterling. Mr. Sterling, please stand. Sterling stood up, his legs feeling like water. In my 20 years on the bench, Judge Vance said, his voice low and dangerous, I have seen liars, thieves, and murderers, but rarely have I seen arrogance quite as toxic as yours. You utilized a 50-ton aircraft as your personal limousine. You compromised safety for a tryst. And when you were caught, instead of apologizing, you tried to destroy the reputation of the woman you wronged. You abused the court system to soothe your bruised ego. The judge leaned forward. Let the record show that this court finds your testimony to be perjury. I am referring the transcripts of this trial to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. And I am referring your file to the FAA with a recommendation that your pilot's license be permanently revoked. You won't just never fly for Vanguard again, Mr. Sterling. You will never fly a kite in this country again. Bang. The gavel struck. It sounded like a gunshot. The courtroom erupted into noise. Reporters scrambled for the doors. Julian Blackwood shook hands with Brian Vane. Alicia Thorne sat still for a moment. She watched Sterling collapse into his chair, burying his face in his hands. She felt the heavy weight of the last 3 months lift off her chest. She stood up, adjusted her blazer, and walked toward the exit. She found Sterling in the hallway 10 minutes later. He was leaning against the marble wall, looking at his phone. He looked up as she approached. For a second, the old Sterling flickered in his eyes, the anger, the entitlement, but it died instantly, smothered by the crushing reality of his ruin. Are you happy? Sterling asked, his voice rasping. You took everything. My job, my pension, my license, my money. Alicia stopped. She didn't look down at him. She looked through him. I didn't take anything, Caleb, she said calmly. You gave it all away. You gave it away the moment you looked at me and decided I didn't matter. I just wanted the seat, he muttered, like a petulant child. It was never about the seat, Alicia said. It was about who you thought owned the sky. You thought you were a god up there. But you forgot that gods fall the hardest. Just then, the double doors of the courtroom swung open. Leora, the woman in the pink dress, the federal air marshal, walked out. She was wearing sunglasses and carrying a Louis Vuitton bag. Sterling straightened up. Leora, baby, listen, it's bad, but I can fix it. We can. Leora didn't even slow down. She walked right past him, the heels of her shoes clicking sharply on the floor. Leora? Sterling called out, desperate. She stopped, turned, and pulled her sunglasses down her nose. She looked at him with the same pitying disdain she had given Alicia on the plane. Caleb, she said, you're unemployed, you're broke, and you're going to be indicted. I date pilots, not passengers. She pushed her glasses back up and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of reporters. Sterling stood there, frozen, alone in the middle of the hallway. Alicia watched her go, then turned back to Sterling. "One last thing," Alicia said. Sterling looked at her, his eyes hollow. "Vanguard is launching a new scholarship program next month," she said. "It's for underprivileged minority students who want to attend flight school. We're calling it the Sterling Initiative." Sterling's face twisted in confusion. "You named it after me?" "No." Alicia smiled, and for the first time, it was a genuine, radiant smile. "We're funding it with the money from your legal fees. You're going to pay for the next generation of pilots who will replace you. Pilots who know that respect is part of the uniform." Alicia Thorne turned her back on him and walked toward the exit, where Brian Vane was waiting for her. They stepped out into the bright Los Angeles sunshine, ready to fly back to Atlanta. This time, Alicia didn't need a ticket. She owned the plane. And that is the story of Captain Caleb Sterling, the man who flew too close to the sun and got burned by the very person he tried to overshadow. It's a brutal reminder that in the age of information, arrogance is the most dangerous co-pilot you can have. Sterling thought Alicia Thorne was a nobody because she was sitting quietly in jeans. He learned the hard way that the quietest people in the room are often the ones holding all the cards. He lost his career, his fortune, and his reputation, all because he couldn't grasp a simple concept: treat everyone with respect, whether they're the CEO or the person in the middle seat. What do you think? Did the punishment fit the crime? Did Sterling deserve to lose his license? Or was the hot mic revelation too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of high-altitude justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story about karma striking back. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind, because you never know who you're really talking to. See you in the next video.